My name is Captain Matthew Sikora. I'm the Green Classroom O-Rep, and thank you for joining us today. Last night we had the honor to hear Rip Esselstyn's talk at Whole Foods, and it was incredible. So this is a great opportunity for us to hear him today, and please have a round of applause for our speaker, Rip Esselstyn.
Thanks, Matthew. It's a pleasure to be here at the Naval Academy. I was here once before in 1981. I went to a private boarding school for the last 2 years of high school called Mercersburg Academy. Any of you ever heard of Mercersburg Academy? Yeah. It's in like central PA. And at the time, it was the #1 swimming high school in the nation. And so in order to have a good dual meet, we had to compete against universities and colleges. And so the Naval Academy is one of the places we came to compete against. But it's been a long time. Beautiful campus. It makes me reflect back on my days at the University of Texas at Austin, where I went to school and graduated, and just how these years are they're so amazing. So cherish them while you're going through it. So Matthew, do you guys know anything about me?
Yes.
Yes? Well, some of you do. Who has no clue who I am or why you're in the room? All right. So let's see, where should I begin? Let me begin with asking you to start off by kind of surrendering everything that you think that you currently know about diet and nutrition, okay? I know that's a pretty big ask, but right now, you guys for the last probably 10, 20 years have been really hoodwinked and bamboozled by the very powerful meat, dairy, and egg and processed for food industries into thinking that a lot of these foods are healthy and health promoting. And nothing could be further from the truth. And I'll start with meat, right? A lot of us here think that we need meat. We need meat for protein. We need meat for a healthy body and to grow. And the reality is that any piece of flesh, whether it's red meat, whether it's fish, whether it's chicken, whether it's pork, any muscle, anything that has a face, anything that comes from anything with a mother, has varying amounts of saturated fat, dietary cholesterol, and problematic animal protein. You can't get away from it. And so muscle, flesh, we don't need to consume it, and yet we consume it by the loads. So let's start with red meat. Most of you probably know that red meat is not the healthiest thing for you. It's loaded with saturated fat, dietary cholesterol, and animal protein. Now, what do a lot of us eat instead of red meat because we think it's healthier? Chicken. Exactly right. You guys get served a lot of chicken here? All right. And if you guys are probably in your late teens, early 20s for the most part, but once you get into your late 20s, 30s, and if you continue to eat the standard American diet, a lot of you will find that you have high cholesterol. And the #1 risk factor for heart disease is an elevated cholesterol. So you may go in and your doctor may tell you to, cut out the red meat and instead do chicken and fish. Well, what the doctor doesn't know and what he doesn't tell you is that chicken has just as much cholesterol as red meat, 70 milligrams per 3 ounces. Your leanest piece of chicken is still 20% saturated fat, and it's still got all kinds of problematic animal protein. And I'll get back to what I mean by problematic animal protein in a second. And then you've got fish. And you guys get served fish here at all? Yeah? Salmon, tilapia, something like that? Well, most fish has more cholesterol than either red meat or chicken. And And the piece of fish that has the lowest cholesterol is wild-caught salmon, and it's 60 milligrams per 3 ounces. So if you're trying to bring down your elevated cholesterol level because you want to get heart healthy, and you're trying to do it with chicken or fish instead of red meat, it's not going to budget, right? Not one iota. So you can't win with any piece of muscle. It just inherently, in the striations in the muscle tissue, we have the building blocks that promote disease and raise cholesterol levels. Okay, next, do you guys eat a lot of eggs here at the Naval Academy? Yes? All right. So a lot of you may think that eggs, and you've been probably led to believe that eggs are the perfect food. I want you to know that eggs are the perfect food if you want to feed chronic Western disease, namely heart disease, fuel the major cancers, and type 2 diabetes. There's only 2 things wrong with eggs: the yolk and the white. All right? 1 egg yolk has the same amount of cholesterol as 2 Burger King Whoppers. 1 egg yolk. And the egg white is a concentrated source of problematic animal protein. All right, so next, let's move on to dairy products. I want you to start thinking of dairy products as different versions of meat. Dairy doesn't matter if it's milk, if it's yogurt, if it's cheese, if it's ice cream, have almost the same identical nutritional composition as meat. So what do I mean by that? So 1 8-ounce glass of whole milk, any of you have any idea how much fat, what percentage fat is in 1 8-ounce glass of whole milk? Probably drink it every day, right?
It's 4%.
Okay, so he says it's 4%, right? But if you do it by the percentage of fat calories on the nutritional facts label, it comes out to 51% fat, not 4%. All right? 1 8-ounce glass of whole milk also is not only 51% fat, it has the same amount of saturated fat as 4 slices of bacon and twice the amount of calories. So I want you to start thinking of milk as liquid meat. Okay? It's liquid flesh. 2% milk, most of you would probably think that it's 2% fat. That's what it says on the front of the carton, 2%. But the reality is it's 35% fat. And 1% milk is not 1% fat, it's 25% fat. And that's because they're very deceptive. They do it by the amount of the volume of the fat in the glass or in that milk as opposed to the number of calories coming from fat. And most of milk is comprised of water, and water has 0 calories, but it does have a substantial amount of weight, right? 1 gallon of milk is 8 pounds. So if you have a quart of milk, that's why you can get away with saying that it's 2% fat, because the fat only represents 2% of the weight of, let's just say, 32 ounces. Okay, skim milk, 0 to 5% fat, but the problem with skim milk is it has a higher proportion than 1%, 2%, or whole milk of problematic animal protein. And the protein that we find in all versions of dairy products is something called casein, C-A-S-E-I-N. And according to the research from T. Colin Campbell at Cornell University, going back now 20 years, and his research in China, it is the #1 tumor and cancer promoter in the American diet. So it's pretty staggering, isn't it? That here we are, and every one of us has been fed this basically lie that we need milk for a strong bones and a strong body. And we're also striving for the milk mustache. You know, the milk industry spends upwards of $300 million a year trying to get us to drink their liquid meat. Okay, next, let's move on to yogurt. I want you to start thinking of yogurt as runny meat, okay? And what's the most popular yogurt these days? It's the Greek yogurt, right? It's 0 fat, and it's got twice the amount of protein, twice the amount of problematic protein coming from casein. 86% of the protein in all dairy products comes from casein. And that casein was put there in that milk to grow, to help grow that baby cow from 60 pounds to 1,000 pounds in a year. And because that casein is such an amazing cellular kind of accelerator, it also accelerates the growth of everything in humans, including tumors and cancers. All right? So that's yogurt. Let's move on to cheese now. Cheese is basically just hardened meat. All right? And the number one source of saturated fat in the American diet comes from cheese. And cheese is just basically, it's 80% fat and it's loaded with salt. So, you eat that cheese and the receptors in your brain go off like a pinball machine, right? Just like we have receptors in our brain for heroin and cocaine and alcohol, we also have it for salt, sugar, and fat. And cheese, all those meats, they're loaded with it. I had an old firefighting buddy that told me, Rip, I want you to know I'm going to have a really hard time giving up cheese because I worship at the Church of Cheeses 7 days a week. And I said, I know you do. Most Americans do. Most Americans love their cheese, but it doesn't love you back. It doesn't love you back, not one iota, right? All it's doing is it is contributing to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, it's fueling cancers, and it's contributing to the basically obesity crisis. So you hereby have permission from me to kick it out of your life because you're in an abusive relationship with cheese. Okay? Next we have ice cream. Ice cream is just frozen meat. And of course we love ice cream. What is it? It's fat and sugar. Fat and sugar. Who doesn't love fat and sugar, right? But again, it doesn't love you back. The next thing that myself, my father, and Colin Campbell, Dean Ornish, John McDougall, a lot of these people that are in this plant-based camp were not fans of extracted oils. And when I say extracted oils, I'm talking about olive oil, canola oil, safflower, sunflower, coconut oil, anything where you take what used to be the original food and then you squeeze out all of its fat. And now all you're left with is 100% fat, the most concentrated source of calories on the planet. And to put this in perspective, does everybody in this room agree that white sugar is empty calories? Okay. Does anybody in this room have any idea how many calories are in 1 tablespoon of white sugar?
450.
50 calories. 50 calories are in 1 tablespoon. Tablespoons, about that big. 1 tablespoon of any extracted oil, olive oil, 120 calories. 120 calories. 100% fat. Let's pick on olive oil for a sec. Since we have been led to believe that this is heart healthy and it's the Mediterranean way and we need to get this healthy fat into our bodies. It doesn't have, it's 15% artery clogging, saturated fat. It doesn't have 1 vitamin or 1 mineral to speak of, trace amounts of vitamin E. And guess how many olives you have to squeeze to get 1 32-ounce bottle of olive oil? 1,375. And then what do you do with all the olives? You get rid of all the water, all the fiber, all the phytonutrients, all the antioxidants, all the protein, and all the carbohydrate, and now all you have is 100% fat. We are an obese nation, right? 76% of us are now overweight or obese. Close to 1/3 of us are considered obese. The number of obesity-related illnesses is staggering, and it contributes to, and it fuels the major cancers, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. So the last thing that we need to be doing is figuring out ways to take in more fat. And that's all you're doing when you're dipping your bread in olive oil, when you're drowning your salads in some sort of a salad dressing where the first or second ingredient is oil, right? When you're stir frying with all these oils, when you're baking with all these oils, I have firefighter friends that do shots of olive oil, thinking it's going to somehow negate everything they're doing throughout the day. So most Americans are doing between 3 to 6 tablespoons of oil a day. That's somewhere between 360 to 700 empty calories a day. Okay, the next thing that I'm not a particular fan of is drinking your calories. We're the only mammals that after we wean ourselves off our mother's breast milk, and there's close to 50,000 mammals, we're the only ones that continue to drink our calories. And not only do we continue to drink our calories from alcohol, milk, soda pop, coffee, lattes, right? All this stuff. We're also the only mammals that drink another mammal's secretions. Rat's milk is 51% protein, and it's that way because that rat's milk is meant to grow whiskers and fur and everything that little rat needs. Human breast milk is 5% protein because that's the ideal amount that we need to grow us the way human beings are supposed to grow, right? Whereas cow's milk is almost 20% protein. So we become so habituated into drinking another mammal's secretions, namely cow's milk, that we don't even think for a second that there's something a little weird or off about it. Whereas if I was to tell you guys tomorrow that we're going to be feeding you all a new kind of milk, it's much more perfectly in alignment with the kind of milk that humans should be getting as far as the blend of protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And it's monkey's milk. How many of you would be kind of grossed out and wigged out by that? Okay, a lot of you wouldn't. Kind of like firefighters, right? But just to kind of try and put it in perspective. But what most of us are after, one of the things in our lifetime, and you guys are young, right? So you may feel a little bit like you're bulletproof, but I want you to know that the reality is that America is not only the fattest country on the planet, we are also the sickest country on the planet. And we spend more per person on healthcare than any other country on the planet. Heart disease, 51% of us will die of heart disease in our lifetime, right? Those are the facts right now. It does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, black, white, doesn't matter. The good news is we now have over 25 years of research showing if you're willing to consume a predominantly low-fat, plant-based diet, you never have to worry about getting heart disease, right? This has been led by my father who influenced me greatly to go down this plant-strong path back in 1987. He started his research at the Cleveland Clinic in 1984, and he's now shown before and after angiograms in hundreds of different patients. And you can actually, the body has the miraculous ability to metabolize away the plaque formations that we start laying down the foundations for when we are 2 and 3 years old. So don't think for a second that you just get heart disease when you're in your 40s and 50s or 60s, right? We start laying it down when we're young with the bacon and the eggs and the chicken fried steaks and the spare ribs and the beef fajitas and the cheese pepperoni pizzas, right? We abuse our bodies 3 to 4 times a day, every day, right? 52 weeks a year for decades. It's no surprise that all of a sudden we get a little lump, right? We get chest pain, which is angina, right? Because we have clogged arteries going on. We start becoming insulin resistant, and we start when we're pre-diabetic. So there's 5 diseases that are dragging this country down right now. 5 that comprise 75% of our $2.8 trillion healthcare bill. That's what it was last year. Heart disease, toothless paper tiger, need never exist. The only reason it exists, the number 1 killer, is because we continue to feed it the fuel it needs to survive. Number 2 and 3 are breast cancer and prostate cancer. And I want you to know that, again, the evidence is out there that you can slow down, halt, and even reverse the major cancers, specifically prostate and breast, by eating a plant-based diet. And I'm going to tell you what plants have that animal products don't have in a second, and remind me if I forget. And then next, actually, let me stick on cancer for a second. We've been fighting this war since 1971 when Richard Nixon declared the war on cancer. We haven't made a dent on it. The projections are that in 5 years it will overtake heart disease as the #1 killer of Americans. This is not a genetic malfunction that's going on. It's the food. It's absolutely 100% the food. And every one of us has a genetic predisposition to certain things, whether it's heart disease, cancer, diabetes. But whether or not, for example, with cancer, you turn on those genes, those cancer genes, those seeds that are there lying dormant, is dependent upon what you're feeding that. What are you fertilizing it with for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And if you're fertilizing it with animal products and the casein that's in dairy products, chances are you're going to be one of 50% of the people that gets a major cancer in their lifetime. The good news is, you look at Dean Ornish's research at the University of California, San Francisco, Colin Campbell in the China study, and by eating this way, you have 1/50th the chance of getting the major cancers that your standard American diet peers do. 1/50th. I'll take those odds every day. And then you have type 2 diabetes. It's on a rampage. It's projected that 1 out of 3 Americans will come down with type 2 diabetes in their lifetime now. And type 2 diabetes is responsible for 95% of the diabetes in this country. This is not, this is a lifestyle-created disease, right? It's a combination of eating the wrong foods, inactivity, and putting on weight. Those 3 things, with the first thing being food. Again, the good news is, just nearby here, some of the most recent profound research by Neil Barnard, Dr. Neil Barnard with George Washington University, has shown that you can actually go from being insulin resistant to insulin sensitive in a matter of weeks, just by changing what you put in your mouth. And instead of eating bacon and eggs and pork and processed refined foods and white bread and white pasta, instead you're eating steel-cut oats, right? You're eating sweet brown rice. You're doing mangoes, you're doing honeydew melons, you're doing sweet potato lasagnas, you're doing 100% whole intact grains, brown rice, millet, amaranth, quinoa, barley. You're doing Swiss chard kale, broccoli, arugula, romaine lettuce. Most Americans rotate through only 10 vegetables and fruits in their lifetime. 10. That's it. There are so many out there, it's frightening. 99% of the food on the planet comes from plants. 99%. 1% comes from animals and animal byproducts. So one of the things that will happen when you take off the blinders that most people have on, and you open up your eyes to this plant-based cornucopia that exists, all of a sudden you realize, wow, I've never tried a cara orange. I've never tried a mango. I've never had a red bell pepper. I've never had Swiss chard. I've never had kale. I've never had collard greens, mustard greens, beet greens. Next we have, and I talked about it earlier, we got the obesity crisis, all right? It is absolutely amazing. So, those 5 diseases, the good news is every one of those, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, prostate cancer, breast cancer, and the obesity crisis, every one of these is a preventable disease. Preventable and reversible. And we spend no education, right, teaching people about this. Doctors aren't educated about this. And that's why, and they're not doing it themselves, and that's why they're not telling their patients to do it as well. So, my story very quickly, and then I'd love to open it up to questions. So I started eating this way in 1987, and after I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, where I went through on a swimming scholarship, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I wasn't ready for a 9-to-5 desk job. And so I decided I would become a professional triathlete. I was always good at swimming, biking, I loved to run. And so within 1 year I turned pro, and what I discovered as I kind of scoured all the triathlon literature out there is that the #1 triathlete on the planet was a guy named Dave Scott, 6-time winner of the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon, which is a 2.4-mile ocean swim, 112-mile bike, and then a marathon on the end of that. And he was plant-based. So I was very intrigued. And for almost 4 years, I had seen my father's research at the Cleveland Clinic, #1 heart hospital in the world, and his amazing results and transformative results in getting people to eat this way. And then, a lot of these people were given less than a year to live. They've been turned down for a 2nd or 3rd bypass surgery, for a 5th, 6th, or 7th stent because they were so sick. And they basically went on to live another 20 years, right? No longer got angina pain. A lot of these gentlemen were so bad off, they were confined to wheelchairs, getting out of their wheelchairs, walking, hunting, playing tennis, walking to malls. One of the first clinical signs of heart disease in men is an underperforming penis. So I love telling guys, in particular, especially guys that think that they're manly and he-men, real men eat plants, guys. Little boys eat meat. And that's because the artery to the male penis is 1/5 the size of all your other arteries. So which one do you think is going to clog up first and foremost? Well, the grease, suet, lard, and cholesterol that's in all the animal and animal byproducts. Bingo, right? So I fueled myself for 10 years, a little over 10 years, with plants to give me the edge as a triathlete. I became one of the top 10 triathletes in the United States, one of the premier open water swimmer in the sport. And after 11 years, actually, I decided it was time for me to now get a real job. And so I became a firefighter for the city of Austin, Texas. And this was in 1997. I want you to know that I was one of 1,000 firefighters that ate this way. And I got berated and made fun of more than any human being deserves, right? More so than, the pressure to do drugs, to do pot, right? To do cocaine, to do alcohol, is the pressure